And introduce to you one of my former colleagues and friends at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Hans Docter, who is the Director of Sustainable Economic Development and Ambassador Private Sector and Development Cooperation. My God, people will leave after you said what you do. Just his name will do. Please, a warm applause for Hans Docter.
Good morning, everybody. It was at least indeed a mouthful, but what we do in my department is creating opportunities through access to finance in developing countries. So that's very much relevant to today, because fragile countries and countries in post-conflict situations are also countries we try to focus on. Access to finance, it's key, for refugees as well. Because as a refugee, we've heard from many speakers, your whole life has been disrupted. You're sitting in a camp, you're sitting in a country that you don't know, and you have to rebuild your life from scratch. You have experience, maybe you have some capital, but you want to move on with your life. You just can't sit and twiddle your thumbs. And through the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and through my department, we try to create opportunities. And one of them is through access to finance, and another one is through education. Of course, humanitarian aid is also important, and we do a lot of that. But humanitarian aid in itself only cares for the basic needs, but it doesn't help to build your life after you are in safety. So access to finance, access to opportunities, to education is key. And that goes at an individual level for individuals, for people who want to start a business, for startups. But it is also key for countries, because after a conflict, or if you're a country that is suddenly faced with a conflict across your border with large numbers of refugees, it influences your economy, it influences stability. And if you want to remain stable and you want to continue to grow, you have to adapt, you have to change laws, you have to create more opportunities to deal with the situation. And one good example is Jordan. We've heard from Paul Collier and from others that a lot needs to be done. And he mentioned FMO. And FMO wasn't here in the morning, and I'm not sure if they're here now. But the Dutch Development Bank, which is supported by the Dutch government, is actually investing in Jordan, in energy, for example, in solar energy. In 3 or 4 different projects, they've invested 100 million euros to generate clean power. And why is that relevant? Of course, it's always good to have sustainable energy, but because of the influx of refugees, you also need more electricity, so you need more sources, so you need this kind of investment. So what we do is not just for individuals, but it's also for governments. We don't just give money, access to finance is key, but the business climate is also very important, because we all know the countries around Syria, even before the conflict, there were still issues in the business climate that could be improved to spur growth. So we engage with governments in discussions on how to improve the business climate and what more they could do to face the challenges that they are facing. We've talked a lot about the countries surrounding Syria, but in Africa, where most of my experience is actually, we have a lot of experience in rebuilding nations after conflict or after a serious event. I was also involved in our fight against Ebola. And the Dutch government was very active in supporting the fight against Ebola in countries like Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea. But we also felt, and our minister was very committed to this, she said, confidence has been shattered, people don't dare to travel there anymore. The economy is coming to a standstill. We have to combat the disease, and we have to do a lot, but we cannot isolate the countries. Business must go on, life must go on. So what we did, even while Ebola was going on, we organized a trade mission to go there. Not because we wanted to benefit from that situation, but to show that that even during a difficult situation like that, life goes on and it's safe to go under certain circumstances. After Ebola was under control, we organized an investor conference because the disease had shattered the economies, combined also in a change in the things they were selling. They had iron mines and things like that, and world market prices were changing. So they were facing a double hit, lack of confidence because of Ebola, and also lower prices for their exports. So we said, we need to help them through this, and we need to organize that investors go there, but we also have to make access to finance possible. So we opened up our programs like the Dutch Good Growth Fund, the programs of FMO, our development bank, other instruments for startups and assistance for entrepreneurs. We opened that up to help local entrepreneurs to grow, but also to bring Dutch entrepreneurs there and help create jobs. One good example is Holland Shipyards. They took over an old, dilapidated shipyard, and now they're repairing ships from all across the West African seaboard, and they provide jobs for 70 people. Another investment is also in electricity by FMO. So that is how we try to deal with this. And even though I'm very proud of what we do, and I think globally in the last year we have created 191,000 jobs, which sounds like a great amount, but of course in 68 countries, some of those countries growing at 1 million, 2 million people a year. Ethiopia is a good example. Every year there's 2 million more Ethiopians on the job market. This is clearly not enough. So, as an international community, we need to do more. Governments like ours, we invest money in this kind of thing, but we have to do it together with others. Commercial banks, private capital needs to flow more to developing countries and countries in post-conflict. So that is also something that we try to do. We try to work with commercial banks on the regulations, on the conditions to which they can also invest. And I think so far we are successful. It could still be more. For every euro that we invest in a business, we also generate 3.5 on average from private sources. So that's money that is coming from the private sector and also helping for development. And I think we can do much more, and I hope that today we are all inspired to come up with new ideas, and in particular for countries facing fragility. Last week, as part of our efforts to support the countries around Syria, we also organized a business conference for Jordan and Lebanon. And about 70 Dutch companies came, and we had speakers from Lebanon and Jordan talking about opportunities. And there are a lot of opportunities. But of course, people are worried about the future and what is going to happen. And so even though we try to bring companies to those countries, we also know it's not enough, and there's real concerns about stability, and we have to face that as well. So apart from creating access to finance, showing opportunities, helping to smooth the way, we also have to invest in stability. And we have to do that together with governments in the region, as Europe, and also with civil society and others, to make sure that the situation stabilizes. We've seen in the world, and I think IFC mentioned it also this morning, a lot of countries that came out of conflict and prospered. Vietnam is a good example, also Cambodia. In Africa, we've seen many examples, Angola and Mozambique. Countries that send hundreds of thousands of refugees across the border to countries like Zambia, where I worked in the early 90s. And I worked for UNHCR. And I also know that Paul Collier made a comment about UNHCR not creating jobs. But in fact, what I was doing there at that time was exactly that, creating jobs, creating opportunities for farmers, because the refugees from Angola and Mozambique at that time coming across the border to Zambia were all farmers. And the Zambian government made land available for them to settle. UNHCR gave them tools and some seeds and some food aid for the first couple of months until the first harvest. And after that, they were on their own and could prosper. If they were a good farmer, they had some surplus they could sell. If they were a medium farmer, they had at least enough to support themselves. And they were also receiving training and advice on how to improve their farming skills. So after the conflicts were over, when they moved back, they had assets, they had skills, and they brought that back to their home countries. And that is the model that should be allowed more often. And we also know that even though UNHCR might want to do this, it's donors that provide money for it, and it's host countries that sometimes allow them or don't allow them to help refugees fend for themselves. And I think we need to engage much more in that debate, because refugees that are not allowed to work will find a way. And I've seen that in Kenya, where I worked as well, in the Dadaab refugee camp. Officially, the refugees were not allowed to work, but if you went there, you wouldn't really see it, because there were shops, trucks were going up and down, but it was all illegal. It was all underground. And of course, that is then also a financing ground and a breeding ground for radicalism, for all kinds of illegal trade, and it's an undesirable situation. So even though sometimes the sentiment in the short term is, oh, we don't want those refugees because they will take our jobs, if they stay for a long time and you don't give them the opportunities to have a legal business, they will go underground. So on that note, I think I see already our moderator coming up the platform. I want to close. I just want to say that as a Dutch government, we've come a long way in working with the private sector and providing access. But I hope that under the next cabinet there will be even more opportunities to do this, because the needs in the world are huge, and we're definitely not in a world where opportunities are everywhere. And still people move to places where there's opportunities, but there should be more places in the world where there are opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you.